I'm forced into speech because men of science have refused to heed my warning. It is altogether against my will that I reveal the reasons for opposing this contemplated return to the Antarctic. This vast fossil hunt, this wholesale boring and melting of the ancient ice cap. I am reluctant not only because my warning may fall on deaf ears, but because the very telling brings shadows to my soul. My name is William Dyer, professor of geology at Miskatonic University. I was among the few who returned from the Miskatonic Antarctic expedition of 1930 to 31. The purpose of this statement is to discourage any further descent into those lifeless wastes. What we found there should have remained untouched and forever unknown. I now recount the circumstances which led to my involvement in that ill-fated expedition. The events which followed must never be repeated for the sake of all mankind. Back in the familiar halls of Miskatonic, we began our preparations. Professor Lake, tireless, brilliant, and rash, pressed for an aggressive drilling strategy of his own devising. I focused instead on logistics and atmospheric survey planning. Our debates were frequent and sometimes tense, but the shared spirit of discovery carried us forward. We believed ourselves ready. We believed the world held no mysteries great enough to defy our instruments. Lake, ever persuasive, argued for his modified drill with fervent certainty. He insisted the irregularities in the ice layers signaled stratified formations beneath. In those days, superstition held no place among us. Strange fossils, unnatural strata, radio interference. These anomalies we dismissed with academic rigor. We were blind then. Willfully so. On the docks of Arkham, final preparations took shape. Danforth, ever meticulous, reviewed cargo manifests and aerial cable mountings with precision. He ensured Gedney, ever skeptical of our thoroughness, followed through with every bolt and lashing. The younger men whispered of over-preparation. I reminded them, exposure kills swiftly in such lands. Over-preparing is preferable to dying unseen in the ice. We all remembered Shackleton's accounts. None wished to make history that way. We departed the docks on September 2nd, 1930, aboard the icebreaker, the Arkham. Our crew numbered 20, students, scientists, mechanics, and a team of hardy dogs. We carried drilling gear, chemical supplies, aeroplanes, wireless sets, and all the fragile hope men place in progress. Weeks passed as we steamed south into storm-lashed waves and the clutch of ancient glacial seas. The cold grew sharper, more insistent. The stars hung lower in the heavens, and the horizon stretched farther still, as if we were slowly parting from the world we knew. The sky remained an endless shroud of gray, its stillness oppressive. The sea, though calm, whispered warnings in its slow churn. We made landfall near McMurdo Sound and established our main base along the coastal ice shelf, a fragile outpost of canvas and crates poised at the edge of an alien continent. Wireless contact was maintained, flights inland coordinated, yet nothing we did seemed preparation enough for what lay ahead. That evening, as we completed final checks, the dogs grew restless. They barked at nothing, snapped at shadows. As the wind rose, it brought with it a distant piping sound. The animals cowered. I, too, heard something beyond the gale, something not of this world. Our first survey flights revealed a brutal terrain, ridges like shattered teeth and crevasses without bottom. On the third flight, we saw something stranger. A dark, bare range rising from the ice, wind-scoured and ancient. The rock bore deliberate grooves and striations, as if carved, though no tool had touched it. Lake believed it to be sedimentary, ancient layers of compacted silt and marine life, far older than any we had charted. I remained deeply uneasy. We discussed setting up a forward camp. Lake pressed his case with urgency, insisting the formations were too significant to ignore. Though I hesitated, the logic was sound. I agreed, cautiously. Lake's forward camp was established nearly 4 hours by air from our base. We ferried men, dogs, and supplies to a lonely ridge, jagged and unnatural in formation. The place felt wrong. The air itself laden with tension. The very ground seemed to whisper its antiquity. Lake's transmissions continued from the forward camp. Initially, he spoke of weather and geology. Then came the breakthrough. He reported fossil-bearing strata, possibly Precambrian. The formations were unnaturally ordered, too precise. He believed we were uncovering something far older than the surrounding range. I instructed him to maintain hourly reports. The signal from his camp would occasionally degrade into a wash of static. When I asked if his connection was failing, there was a long pause on his end. Then the radio hissed, and Lake's voice returned, altered. He spoke of layers beneath the ice, structured, deliberate, as if the ice itself told a story. Not just biology, he insisted. Legacy. His theories grew bolder. He believed a constructed formation lay below the Mesozoic ice, an era spanning 250 million years, reptilian and mammalian origins. Lake was drilling toward it, obsessed. His final lucid message described 12 specimens removed from the ice. Thereafter, his transmissions faltered, broken by static. As the temperature fell and the wind shrieked, silence took the airwaves. In my log, I recorded his claims. Cellular cohesion, twitching under magnification. A part of me hoped it was delusion, but the detail chilled me. Lake described star-shaped ridges, radial symmetry, alien configurations that suggested intelligence. I warned him to be cautious. He did not understand, or perhaps he did, too well. Even then, the signs were clear, but we were too enamored with discovery, too proud. We had uncovered the bones of something prehistoric, but the soul of it still slept. The wind whistled around us like a voice from deep time, something ancient, something wrong. It had been 12 hours without word from Lake. No reply. I ordered the plane prepared. We would fly at dawn. And as the storm howled, and the stars turned above that pale and cursed plateau, I felt something vast and terrible watching from beyond the peaks. We cut through the morning sky toward Lake's last known position, an unspeakable dread growing with each mile. Below us stretched the untrodden white desert, its secrets locked in endless ice. Ahead, the stark mountains clawed at the horizon, a wall of nightmare black against the brightening sky. It was Danforth who first drew our notice to the skyline. With growing awe, he pointed out the jagged summits looming ahead, some impossibly high, others uncannily regular in form. Great cones, immense cubes, and terrifyingly just as Lake had described in his last transmissions. These forms did not suggest mere geological upheaval. Their geometry, too deliberate, too monumental, seemed born not of nature, but of alien design. They recalled no architecture known to man, save in those dreamlike depictions by certain obscure artists who imagined lost plateaus or sunken cities. Something in these colossal silhouettes struck at the subconscious, conjuring forbidden myths and evoking a primal, ancestral fear. In those shapes, I believe, some part of us recognized an intelligence not our own and not extinct. A strange chill passed through me. These mountains of madness stirred dismal fancies I had gleaned from forbidden books. Though we had no inkling then of the discoveries to come, I believe some primal part of me already understood the dread we would uncover. We arrived at Lake's camp in the weak afternoon light. A scene of desolation greeted us, tents torn open and equipment scattered. The snow was churned and stained, though most of the bodies were gone. Those that remained were grotesquely damaged, their condition inexplicable. The sled dogs, we learned, had grown strangely agitated before the end, howling without cause, pacing, and refusing to approach the ancient specimen Lake had unearthed. What madness overtook them we could only guess. Whatever had struck Lake's party had been swift, merciless, and wholly alien. No animal could have wrought such devastation, and the evidence before us demanded a thorough investigation. We began our grim survey of the site. The tents were in ruin, torn and flattened as though by monstrous strength. Instruments lay smashed and provisions scattered. We found grotesque remains, both human and canine, dissected with surgical precision, yet left in disarray, as though their destruction were part ritual, part rage. Near one of the collapsed shelters, we uncovered Lake's field notes, frozen but intact. They described in meticulous detail the excavation of a cave nearby, opened with dynamite after fossilized samples were found embedded in the rock face. The last entry was hurried, broken as if written in terror. Following the disturbed snow and what seemed to be dragging trails, we came upon it. The entrance to that black cavern. It yawned like a wound in the ice wall, wide and low. The rocks around it were strangely scorched. We knew from Lake's notes that this was where the first discoveries had been made. But the cavern was not the end. It was a threshold. As we moved deeper, we found old excavation paths leading into the base of the mountain itself. The tunnels widened, descending in a gradual slope, with walls of hewn stone that soon bore the unmistakable touch of design. We had passed from the known world into something older and hidden, a space not merely natural, but constructed. The darkness beyond seemed to pulse with a presence, as if the cave and what lay beyond it were waiting. We descended cautiously. What we found beneath the glacier defied belief. At first, the space opened into what seemed a series of natural caverns, but the walls quickly betrayed intention, angles too sharp, curves too fluid, proportions that disoriented the eye. The stone underfoot was ancient basalt, black and dry with the chill of endless ages. As we continued forward, the chambers grew larger and more deliberate, until we stood at the edge of a great subterranean gulf. Towering structures rose from the floor, immense blocks, tiered spires, and geometries that defied Euclidean logic. We had come upon a city not made by men. The air was still, the silence heavy with the weight of unnumbered ages. No snow had entered this buried necropolis. No wind stirred its vaults. It was not lifeless. The architecture was like none we had ever known, yet was unmistakably artificial. Towering archways, spiral corridors, and strange carvings hinted at a race older than humanity, older perhaps than life as we understand it. Here, in frozen death, slumbered the legacy of an elder civilization. We followed a descending ramp deeper into the structure. Danforth, despite his fear, was transfixed. The deeper we ventured, the more the air pressed around us, as if the stones themselves disapproved of our intrusion. We passed through great galleries where sculpted wall carvings told the story of the city's builders. They were barrel-shaped beings with starfish heads, ridged bodies, and countless limbs. Elder things, as Lake had named them. The carvings showed their rise from the primal sea, where they had first come down from the stars, mastering biology and chemistry to engineer new forms of life. Scenes depicted their construction of vast cities beneath ancient oceans, the development of language, and the codification of strange sciences no human mind could decipher. Art flourished among them. Music, mural work, and alien symmetries carved into living stone. But not all was peace. The carvings showed their clashes with other extraterrestrial races, serpentine Yithians, fungoid Migo from distant worlds, and at last, the protoplasmic horrors known as shoggoths. Created first as slaves, these shape-shifting beings eventually turned upon their masters, engulfing cities in black, seething tides. And yet, the carvings did not end in final ruin. The elder things, it seemed, endured. The final panels suggested a retreat, deep into the caverns below, far from surface ruin and the rebellion of the shoggoths. There, they might have persisted, carrying on their unfathomable lives in silence and shadow. That, at least, was the impression left upon us by the last of the carvings. Before long, the architecture gave way to broader corridors and naturalistic vaults, as though the hand of design had receded and nature had slowly crept in. The air grew damper, the stone underfoot uneven and slick. A faint smell, like brine and mildew, met us, organic and strange. We entered a chamber vast and dark, the walls receding into shadow. At first, we thought it empty, only uneven stone and stagnant air. Shapes shifted in the gloom. Not movement exactly, more a suggestion of form pulling away from the surrounding rock. And then we saw them. Blind albino penguins, grotesque and unseeing, enduring in this forsaken deep against all logic and nature. Their eyes were sealed with time, blind sockets staring into nothing. They did not startle or flee. Instead, they cooed low and rhythmic, as if chanting in sleep. Their presence struck us not as a curiosity, but as a warning that life persisted in these depths, altered by more than time. We pressed onward, shaken by what we had seen, yet compelled by the city's relentless pull. The architectural rhythm shifted again. The rough, naturalistic vaults narrowed into deliberate corridors, walls bent at disquieting angles, ceilings etched with strange patterns. It was as if we had passed through a membrane and re-entered the heart of something ancient and watching. Then the carvings began to return. They emerged first in broken bands, chipped and faint, glimpses of panic and violence half erased by time or something worse. With each step, the pictographs became clearer, more urgent. They told not of triumph, but of fear, not of endurance, but of collapse. Near the bottommost galleries, the walls bore fresher markings, scratches, gouges, and a strange trail of slime. Danforth and I exchanged no words, but we both knew something still moved in these halls. The final image was a crude carving of a shoggoth, vast and formless with a single terrible eye. It was not a historical record. It felt like a warning left for us. The carvings had ended in horror, but the silence that followed was worse. In those final passages, the air grew heavy, saturated with dread. The trail of slime thickened, its stench undeniable. Walls seemed to sweat with unseen moisture. And then we heard it. A rhythmic, wet thudding echoed through the corridor behind us, as if something enormous was dragging itself across stone. We did not speak. We did not hesitate. We ran, fleeing blindly through the cyclopean corridors, the echo of that dreadful pursuit growing louder behind us. There was no clear path, only instinct and terror. The architecture warped and folded around us as if the city itself resisted our escape. Behind us came a gurgling roar. Not quite a voice, but something worse. Mimicry without understanding. Mockery without mercy. We turned a corner, and the sound fell away for a breath. We did not know if we had lost it, or if it had merely paused to listen. We did not stop. We ran. Ran as one runs in nightmares, with sound and shadow converging in pursuit. The halls behind us thundered with echoes of that inhuman wailing, swelling like some ancient chorus of the damned. A rumbling slosh followed, wet, massive, unnatural. Danforth behind me cried out in gasping horror. His voice cracked beneath hysteria as he screamed of something coming, something unspeakable. We burst into the dead daylight of the open plaza, where even the sun seemed to recoil. That accursed howling bounced from the surrounding stone, deafening and close. I kept my eyes forward, but Danforth looked back, and his scream told me enough. We tumbled into the plane. My hands, numb with dread, fumbled over the controls. For a dreadful moment, the propeller stuttered, then thundered into full fury. We began to roll. Just then, at the far end of the plaza, a horror emerged into view. Black, glistening, without true form. A heaving, gelatinous mass riddled with pale, lidless eyes. It surged toward us with monstrous speed, undulating and slapping the stone like a tide of living tar. The sight shattered what remained of Danforth's composure. He collapsed into shrieking laughter. I slammed the throttle forward. The plane jolted, slewed, nearly struck a block of cyclopean stone, but we lifted. We rose into the cold, thin air above the city. Below us, that loathsome thing bellowed its cry again. Now a distorted howl of thwarted pursuit. I saw it climbing impossibly, writhing up the sheer face of a colossal wall with grotesque agility. We cleared the rooftops by mere feet. As we flew over the pass, I made the mistake of looking west. Beyond that nightmare city rose peaks no chart had ever shown, towering, jagged, blacker than space. Danforth saw more than just mountains. He saw a presence, something for which even form was a lesser state, something from before time, before creation. The elder things had fled from it. And far behind us, though we were climbing into the sky, I thought I heard it again, faint, distorted, and impossibly distant. We touched down at the main Miskatonic base, the same camp from which our survey had begun. It stood as we had left it, still and silent beneath the pale sky. Here, far from the mountain's shadow, the horror felt momentarily distant, but not gone. I began gathering materials, preparing for the work I knew must be done. They were logistical records, expedition maps, and coded transcripts whose meanings now felt too dangerous to risk. I set them aside. Danforth said nothing. He only stared westward, back toward the unholy range, his eyes locked in a silence I dared not break. That night, I reviewed the fragments one final time. Lake's anatomical sketches, the mural tracings, impossible biological notes. They told a story not of ancient history, but of a world still alive beneath the ice. In the dim glow of the lantern, I committed their details to memory, then consigned them and the other records I had set aside earlier to flame. Some truths once seen must be unmade. I remembered the murals. I remembered the story they told, the elder things descending from the stars, shaping the seas, giving life, warring with intruders, then falling into stagnation. In their pride, they created the shoggoths, formless protoplasmic slaves to build and serve. For a time, they were obedient. But over uncounted ages, something changed. The shoggoths began to think. There were signs of rebellion, of cities drowned, of wars fought not just with outsiders, but within. The elder things, once masters, became survivors, retreating into the deepest vaults of their city, clinging to a fraction of their former glory. The final mural was blank. No artist had dared render what came next. No man should ever seek to. I speak now because the warnings have gone unheeded. The university plans to return, to uncover, to claim. They think our fears madness, but the things we glimpsed beneath the ice have not perished. They wait. Beneath the stone lie secrets not meant to be understood, a city raised by minds alien to ours, and a darkness that mocks the stars. We were not meant to see it. If you value your reason, do not go back.
You've reached the end of the signal. If the story held you, stay with us. Like and subscribe, it really does help. There are more corridors ahead, more transmissions waiting to be heard. Thank you for listening.